My sister told everyone, Dad left you nothing. But the judge revealed the hidden clause in my favor. The room was suffocating, the air thick with the scent of lilies and unspoken resentment. My sister Karen stood at the front, her arms crossed, her lips curled into a smug little smile that made my stomach twist. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, shuffled papers at the mahogany desk, his glasses slipping down his nose. Everyone was there. Cousins, aunts, uncles, even neighbors who barely knew Dad. And me, Lily, standing in the back, feeling like an outsider at my own father's will reading. Karen leaned toward our cousin Mike and whispered something, her eyes flicking to me. Mike smirked, and I felt that familiar sting, like a paper cut you don't see coming. Dad left you nothing, Karen had told me last night, her voice dripping with fake pity over the phone. You know how he felt about you, Lily. Always causing trouble. Her words echoed in my head as I gripped the edge of my chair, my knuckles whitening. She told everyone the same thing, our aunts, our cousins, even the lady who used to bring Dad casseroles. They all believed her. I could feel their pitying glances like I was some charity case who'd wandered into the wrong room. But something in me refused to break. I'd spent years by Dad's side, changing his sheets when he got too weak, driving him to chemo, listening to his stories about Mom when he missed her most. Karen? She'd show up for holidays, flash her perfect smile, and leave before the dishes were done. Yet here she was, acting like she owned his legacy. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. Something wasn't right. Dad wouldn't do this to me. Would he? Hey, before we go on, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment with your city and country. Let's see how far this story travels. The lawyer cleared his throat, and every head turned. We'll begin shortly, he said, his voice shaky. I caught a flicker of unease in his eyes, something Karen didn't seem to notice. She was too busy adjusting her designer scarf, basking in the attention. I wanted to scream, to tell everyone she was lying, but I stayed quiet. I'd learned long ago that shouting never worked with her. She'd just twist it, make me look unhinged. Instead, I watched and waited. Let me take you back a bit, to when things weren't so heavy. Growing up in our small Ohio town, Dad was the glue that held us together. Mom passed when I was 10, Karen 12, and Dad stepped up in ways I'll never forget. He worked double shifts at the factory to keep our little house, the one with the creaky porch and the backyard swing. Karen was always the golden child, cheerleader, straight A student, the one who could do no wrong. I was quieter, bookish, the one who'd rather help Dad fix the leaky sink than go to prom. He'd call me his little mechanic, and we'd laugh over greasy pizza afterward. But Karen? She started pulling away in high school. She'd roll her eyes when Dad asked her to mow the lawn or visit Grandma. I've got plans, she'd say, already halfway out the door. By the time she moved to Chicago for college, she barely called. I stayed close, went to community college, and checked in on Dad every day. When he got sick 3 years ago, I was the one who moved back home. I cooked his meals, paid his bills, held his hand when the pain got bad. Karen would breeze in maybe twice a year, always with some excuse about her busy life. The favoritism wasn't just in my head. Dad's sister, Aunt Linda, would gush over Karen's Instagram posts, her fancy job, her downtown apartment. Meanwhile, I was just Lily, the one who didn't do much. At family dinners, they'd ask Karen about her promotions, barely glancing at me. Once, Uncle Tom even said, "Lily, you should be more like your sister." I smiled through it, but it hurt. Dad saw it, though. He'd squeeze my hand under the table and whisper, "You're my rock, kiddo." When Dad's health took a turn last year, Karen started showing up more. Not to help, but to check in. She'd ask Dad about the house, the savings, the old family cabin by the lake. I didn't think much of it at first. Just Karen being Karen, always chasing the next shiny thing. But then I overheard her on the phone one night talking to Mike. "It's all set," she said. "Dad's leaving me everything. Lily doesn't need to know." My heart sank. I wanted to confront her, but I didn't. I trusted Dad. He knew me. He knew the truth. Still, the doubts crept in. Karen had a way of bending people to her will. Had she gotten to Dad too? When he passed 2 months ago, I was by his side, holding his hand as he took his last breath. Karen wasn't there. She was stuck in traffic, she said later, but I saw her post a selfie at a wine bar that same night. The family didn't care. They rallied around her at the funeral while I stood alone arranging the flowers, making sure everything was perfect for Dad. The funeral was a blur of gray skies and whispered conversations. Our little church in Ohio was packed, the pews creaking under the weight of relatives and neighbors. I stood near the front, clutching a crumpled tissue, my eyes fixed on Dad's photo by the altar. He was smiling in that old flannel shirt, the one he wore when we'd fish at the lake. I could still hear his laugh, deep and warm, like it could fix anything. But nothing could fix the tension in that room. Karen was front and center, dabbing her eyes with a delicate handkerchief, her black dress perfectly tailored. She looked like she'd stepped out of a movie, playing the grieving daughter to perfection. People swarmed her, offering hugs and murmurs of, "He was so proud of you." I stood off to the side, arranging the guest book, making sure the pastor had water. Nobody noticed. Nobody except Mrs. Carter, the neighbor who used to bring Dad her famous meatloaf. She squeezed my arm and whispered, "You did good by him, Lily." I managed a nod, but my throat was too tight to answer. The air shifted when Karen started talking louder, her voice carrying over the soft organ music. "Dad always said the cabin was his pride and joy," she told Aunt Linda, her tone just a little too sweet. "I'll make sure it stays in the family." I froze. The cabin? That was our place, Dad and me. We'd spent summers there, fixing the dock, watching fireflies. Karen hadn't been there in years. I caught her eye and she gave me that smile again, the one that said, "I've already won." At the reception, the tension got worse. I was carrying a tray of sandwiches when I overheard Mike talking to Uncle Tom by the coffee urn. "Karen said Lily's not getting a dime," Mike said, not even bothering to lower his voice. Dad thought she was too irresponsible. Irresponsible? I'd given up my job, my apartment, everything to care for Dad. My hands shook as I set the tray down, but I kept my head high. I wouldn't let them see me crack. Then came the first jab. Karen walked over, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, and handed me a glass of iced tea. "You holding up okay, Lily?" she asked, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I know this must be hard, especially since Dad and I were so close. The room went quiet. Aunt Linda raised an eyebrow and Cousin Sarah gave me a pitying look. I wanted to throw the tea in Karen's face, but I just said, "I'm fine, Karen. Thanks." She smirked and walked away, her mission accomplished. The room buzzed with whispers, and I felt like I was shrinking. Later that day, after the last casserole dish was cleared, we gathered at Dad's house for a family meeting. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, had asked to meet before the official will reading. I sat on the old couch, the one with the faded plaid pattern, while Karen perched on a dining chair like it was a throne. The rest of the family filled the room: Uncle Tom, Aunt Linda, Mike, Sarah, and a few distant cousins who'd shown up out of nowhere. The air was thick, like we were all holding our breath. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "We'll go over the formalities tomorrow," he said, his voice clipped. "But I need to confirm a few details first." He glanced at me just for a second, and I caught something in his expression. Nervousness, maybe? It was gone before I could be sure. Karen leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her tone daring him to say yes. He shook his head too quickly. No, just paperwork." That's when I noticed it, a small, worn envelope peeking out from the stack of documents in his briefcase. It had Dad's handwriting on it, the same scratchy script he used for grocery lists. My heart skipped. I wanted to ask about it, but Karen was already talking, steering the conversation to the house's value, the cabin, the savings. Everyone nodded along except Mrs. Carter, who'd stayed to help clean. She was in the kitchen wiping the counter, but I saw her pause when Mr. Thompson mentioned the will. She looked at me, her eyes soft but knowing, like she was trying to tell me something. After the meeting, I caught her alone by the sink. "Mrs. Carter," I whispered, "did Dad ever say anything to you about me? About the will?" She hesitated, glancing toward the living room where Karen was holding court. Then she leaned in close. "Your dad loved you, Lily. More than you know. He told me once he'd make sure you were taken care of. Said he had a plan." Her words hit me like a lifeline, but before I could ask more, Mike called her over to help with something. She gave me a quick nod and walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Karen's words, "Dad left you nothing," clashed with Mrs. Carter's. Dad had a plan? What did that mean? I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment I'd spent with him. The way he'd pat my hand and say, "You're my rock, Lily." The way he'd laugh when I burned dinner but ate it anyway. Could he really have left me out? Or was there something Karen didn't want me to know? As I lay awake that night, memories of Dad flooded back, each one a sharp reminder of what I'd given up and what Karen hadn't. 2 years ago, when Dad's cancer got worse, I'd quit my job at the library to move back home. It wasn't a big job, but I loved it, helping kids find books, organizing story hours. Leaving hurt, but Dad needed me. I'd wake up at dawn to make his coffee just the way he liked it, strong with a splash of milk. We'd sit on the porch, him in his old rocking chair, me on the steps, talking about everything and nothing. "You're too good to me, Lily," he'd say, his voice raspy but warm. I'd just smile and tell him to hush. Karen, though, she was a ghost. She'd call once a month, maybe, her voice all business. "How's Dad? Still stubborn?" she'd ask, like it was a chore to check in. When she did visit, she'd breeze in with takeout and a smile, acting like she'd been there all along. Dad would light up. She was his daughter, after all. But I saw the way his shoulders sagged when she left after an hour. Once, after she canceled a Thanksgiving visit last minute, Dad turned to me and said, "You're the one who stays, Lily. That matters." I clung to those words now like a raft in a storm. But there were other memories, ones that stung. Like the Christmas when Aunt Linda gave Karen a gold necklace and me a pair of socks. Or the time Uncle Tom asked me in front of everyone why I hadn't made something of myself like Karen. I'd laughed it off, but Dad hadn't. He'd pulled me aside later, his eyes fierce. "Don't let them dim you, Lily. You're worth more than they know." I believed him then, but now, with Karen's words ringing in my ears, "Dad left you nothing." Doubt crept in. Had I been wrong about him? Then there was the cabin. It was our sanctuary, a rickety old place by Lake Erie where Dad taught me to fish and tell bad jokes. Karen hated it. Too many bugs, no Wi-Fi. But last summer, when Dad was too weak to go, I drove up alone to clean it. I found a letter tucked in his old tackle box, addressed to me in his shaky handwriting. It wasn't about the will, just a note saying, "Lily, this place is yours as much as it's mine. Don't let anyone take that from you." I'd cried reading it, but I hadn't told anyone. Now, I wondered if that letter meant more than I'd thought. The next morning, we gathered in Mr. Thompson's office, a cramped room that smelled of old coffee and dusty files. The family packed in tight, Karen up front, her chin high, Mike and Sarah on either side like her personal cheer squad. Aunt Linda and Uncle Tom sat stiffly, their faces unreadable. I took a seat in the back, my hands clammy, my heart hammering so loud I swore everyone could hear it. Mr. Thompson stood at his desk, his tie crooked, his fingers twitching as he opened a thick folder. "Let's begin," he said, his voice barely steady. He started reading, his words blurring into legal jargon about estate distribution and assets. I caught snippets, Dad's house, his savings, the cabin. Karen leaned forward, her eyes gleaming like she was about to open a winning lottery ticket. I felt sick, my mind replaying her smug voice. "Dad left you nothing." Then Mr. Thompson got to the main part. "To my daughter Karen," he read, "I leave the primary residence at 142 Maple Street, including all furnishings, and the sum of $50,000 from my savings." The room erupted in murmurs. Karen's smile widened, and she shot me a look that said, "Told you so." Mike clapped her on the back, and Aunt Linda nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. My chest tightened. The house? The money? That was everything, wasn't it? I stared at the floor, willing myself not to cry. Mr. Thompson kept going. "To my nephew, Mike, I leave my vintage truck, and to my sister, Linda, my collection of antique clocks." More nods, more whispers. I waited, my name hanging in the air like a question nobody cared to ask. Finally, he said, "And to my daughter, Lily." He paused, his eyes flicking to me, then back to the paper. I leave, the sum of $5,000. The room went silent. Karen let out a soft laugh, quickly covered by a cough. Mike smirked. Aunt Linda gave me that pitying look again. $5,000? After everything? I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hands shook, and I gripped the chair to steady myself. Karen turned, her voice syrupy. I'm so sorry, Lily. I know you were hoping for more. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even look at her. All those years, all those nights by Dad's side, and this was it? $5,000 and a pat on the head? The room spun, and I wanted to run, to scream, to demand answers. But I stayed frozen, the weight of everyone's eyes pinning me down. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat again, louder this time. There's one more thing, he said, his voice cracking. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out that worn envelope I'd seen yesterday, the one with Dad's handwriting. My heart stopped. Karen's smile faltered. Mr. Thompson held up the envelope, his hands steady now, like he'd been waiting for this moment. This is a codicil, he explained, keeping it simple. A legal addition to the will, written by your father 6 months ago. He insisted it be read last. The room went dead quiet. Karen's face drained of color, her smug smile vanishing like smoke. Mike shifted uncomfortably, and Aunt Linda's eyes widened. I leaned forward, my breath caught in my throat. What was this? He opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet, Dad's handwriting clear despite the shakes from his treatments. Mr. Thompson read aloud. To my daughters, Karen and Lily. I've watched you both grow, and I love you equally. But love isn't blind. Karen, you've built a life I'm proud of, but you've been distant when it mattered. Lily, you've been my constant, giving up so much without complaint. The initial will stands, but with this clause, if any beneficiary spreads false information about the estate before the reading, their share is forfeited and transferred to the other. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen jumped up, her chair scraping the floor. What? That's ridiculous, I didn't… But Mr. Thompson cut her off, holding up a hand. Your father anticipated this. He provided evidence, recordings of phone calls, emails. You told family members, including Lily, that she'd get nothing. You even shared it with neighbors. It's all here. He tapped a folder on his desk. Karen's face twisted in shock. He can't do that! It's not fair! She shouted, her voice cracking. Mike tried to pull her back, but she shook him off. Aunt Linda murmured, Karen, what did you do? The room erupted, whispers turning to outright arguments. Uncle Tom looked stunned. Sarah avoided my eyes. I sat there, frozen, as the pieces fell into place. Dad's plan. Mrs. Carter's words. He'd known. He'd protected me. Mr. Thompson continued, his voice firm. As a result, Karen's share, the house and the $50 transfers to Lily. Additionally, the family cabin by the lake goes to Lily outright, as per the codicil. The other bequests remain. Silence fell, heavy and awkward. Karen stared at me, her eyes blazing with fury. Then she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the pictures rattled. Mike followed, muttering excuses. The others shifted, avoiding my gaze, the air thick with embarrassment. I didn't cheer or gloat. I just felt a wave of relief wash over me like I could finally breathe. Dad had seen it all. He'd made sure justice was done. In the days that followed, the family scattered like leaves in the wind. Karen called once, her voice bitter over the phone. You think you won, Lily? Enjoy it while it lasts. I didn't argue. I just said, I'm sorry it came to this, and hung up. She didn't reach out again. Mike sent a text apologizing, saying he'd believed her stories. Aunt Linda stopped by the house, Dad's house, now mine, with a pie and awkward words. We should have seen it, Lily. You were always there. I nodded, forgiving but not forgetting. The whispers at church faded, replaced by nods of respect. Mrs. Carter hugged me tight and said, Your dad was a smart man. I moved into the house properly, paying off the last of Dad's medical bills with the money. The cabin? I went there first thing, sitting on the dock with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the lake. It felt like Dad was there, his hand on my shoulder. "You're my rock," he'd say. I smiled through tears, knowing he'd set things right not for revenge, but for fairness. Family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when it counts. Looking back, it hurts how money can tear people apart. Dad's clause wasn't just about the inheritance, it was a lesson in honesty, in not assuming you know someone's heart. I didn't rub it in anyone's face. I just lived my life, quieter now, but stronger. If there's one thing I've learned, it's to trust the people who prove themselves, not the ones who talk the loudest. Hey, if this story hit home for you, maybe reminded you of your own family drama, drop a comment below sharing what part surprised you most. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for listening.